Morning, Kato. We're live.
Morning, Rich. How are you?
Oh God, I'm good, man. Been up since like 4:30 this morning. Couldn't really sleep, anxious, and wanted to work on a few things before I had this chat with you. And there we are.
Hey, I get it. And I slept really well. Being retired and understanding how important sleep is, I value every second of it now.
Me too. And it wasn't always the case, but I get it now.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I got to blame Seeklander for getting me stuck on naps, man. I was out there doing some training with him 5 or 6 years ago, and we came back from clinch MMA. Let's take a nap before we go to the range. And then every day that kind of became the thing. And I'm like, now I'm hooked on them.
Nothing wrong with that.
No, man, I'm loving it.
If you have the time for it, do it.
Yeah. And as you know, being another retired guy, life is pretty damn good on the other side.
It sure is. I tell all my students, man, I go, if you're close, I go, the light at the end of the tunnel, it just gets brighter and brighter and brighter. It's so worth it.
100%. I should have done this a long time ago. You know what I'm saying? When I was younger, I should have retired.
Yeah.
All right. Let me read your impressive bio, brother. Kerry Kato Murakami. Am I saying it right?
Murakami.
The founder of Rectitude Training LLC, is devoted to training law enforcement and the civilian defender. Kerry is a retired law enforcement officer from the state of Illinois and has spent all 28 years in the patrol division. God bless you, brother. He initially became a defensive tactics instructor and field training officer in 1995, a firearms instructor in 2003, and finally a scenario-based instructor in 2014. As a martial artist, Kerry received his black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu from Professor Mark Vives of New Breed Training Center in 2019. As a co-lead of his department's scenario-based training program and lead instructor for his department's Combatives club, Kerry is able to use his skills to create, update, and implement training programs on the range and in the mat room. He also consults with outside law enforcement agencies on creating and updating training programs, including their agency's Combatives Jiu-Jitsu clubs. In early 2021, Rectitude Training LLC became a preferred provider to Intergovernmental Risk Management Agency, IRMA, one of the largest risk pools in the Chicagoland area. The goal is to increase frequency and consistency of defensive tactics / combatives training while reducing officers and suspects' injuries. I love that, man. And it's often overlooked. We don't want to hurt the suspect any more than we want to get officers hurt.
Yeah, that was one of the goals when I started working on team tactics. We were, arresting people, in the typical polyester pylon, and that just wasn't satisfactory. And so, we developed some team tactics with the help of Cliff Byerly of Hill Country Combatives, and we've been implementing his stuff for just over 10 years now, with a high success rate. And it's with my business, Rectitude Training, we're taking it all over Chicagoland area, and we've seen a lot of success in the last 3+ years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I tell you, where our team tactics came in for me is the years I spent as a bouncer before I went into corrections and ultimately on patrol. We were very, very, very efficient. Me and another guy could swiftly and efficiently take somebody out, get them outside the club and let them have a nice day, help them get to their car and et cetera. And without injury to anybody. And then I got into law enforcement. I'm like, what is this monkey crap? You're just piling on somebody and nobody knows what to grab. They're grabbing me. And it's just madness, man.
Yeah. And it's funny because when we start to add in a little stress and add a little pressure, people will start to grab their partner's hand to cuff it. And their partner's like, hey, that's my hand. And I'm like, see, a little added stress and you start cuffing the wrong hand. And so, you need to add in team tactics. You need to add in pressure. You need to add a little in stress. And you need that. It needs to be consistent and frequent. So.
Yeah, the frequency of training is something that I think recently I've just been getting into the science on that. The frequency is almost more important than the actual what was it I read recently? Are you up on that science, Kato? You know what I'm talking about?
No, I'm not.
Yeah, it has something to do with like the frequency of it, the nearest the training has been relative to you in the event that you're in, no matter what it is, flying a plane, driving a car, etc. It is almost as much as I got this impressive resume. I went to all these driving schools. That's great. You know, you went to EVOC 25 years ago, but I bet you somebody that just went to a weekend driving school can probably outdrive you now because of the frequency. I don't know. I've read a
Yeah,
paper on that recently.
correct. Yeah, frequency of training is super important, and it's way overlooked. Law enforcement's horrible with that. I mean, we're being forced here in Illinois to become more frequent, mainly because of the mandates that's been issued. Um, but even that is unfortunately dictated by politicians who just don't understand. And I'll give you an example. High risk vehicle stops. Don't get me wrong, super important. It should definitely be trained. I am not saying that at all. But if you start looking at the climate right now, nobody's stopping for us.
Mm-hmm.
And I shouldn't say us now, I'm retired.
Mm-hmm.
But nobody's stopping for the police. And so what we really need to see are the trends. And the trend right now is bad guys are driving away at high rate of speed, typically crashing into a pole and then bailing out the car. So we need to train for the crash, the bailout, and then the arrest.
Mm-hmm.
But again, law enforcement, we're behind in every aspect, and it'll be. I mean, here I can tell you right now, I could generate a curriculum for this right off the top of my head. I can write it on the napkin right here, and I could submit it, but the approval for it and all that stuff will take forever. And then I just joke with this. Who right now to get them in law enforcement, and they come to my class, and I say, "Hey, we have a crash here. We're going to have a simulated bad guy, one of the students. He's going to be our rabbit. He's going to take off. Your job is to chase him, catch him, and then put him in custody."
Mm-hmm.
People are like, "I'm not chasing anybody." Not for a training class. And then on top of that, I guarantee you will have the highest rate of injury in that class because you'll start seeing torn Achilles, sprained ankles, MCLs, you name it, you're going to have it. And that class will be put on the shelf and never taught again. So,
Yeah, you said you got to deal with the crash, the bailout, the chase, and the arrest, right?
right.
There's actually the driving portion, right? The
Well,
chase, the
right,
crash. You know what I'm saying?
right.
But of course, but in the modality that you teach with defensive tactics, I think you're right. But I mean, if you want to get the full spectrum, the driving portion without killing civilians, and that's why, I mean, you were a cop in the 90s. I was a cop in the 90s, and the being risk averse goes back as far as you probably want to go. But now we see the Ferguson effect. And like you said, well, I'm not chasing anybody. And I think I could be wrong, Kato, you tell me, but I think that mentality crosses over into the actual job. I'm not chasing that dude. I'll catch him later. I'll run the tag, we'll get him later.
That's pretty much the current state of law enforcement is we're going to catch his tag. We'll ID him through cameras, and then we'll find him later, and then we'll go serve a warrant and we'll go get him. Which, I mean, it is a valid method, but if you got in law enforcement, you wanted to get in foot pursuits, you wanted to catch bad guys. That's, but times are changing. So,
well, and I was going to talk to you. One of the questions I had for you, and I want to be respectful of your time, is
yeah.
combatives in the post-COVID Ferguson effect world, man. Where do you see this now relative to where it was? Where do you see it going? Take it wherever you want, Kato.
So I think, there's a current movement of make jiu-jitsu mandatory, and I think that's phenomenal. I hate to poo-poo on it, but I don't see it happening. I don't see any more cops going out and training than kind of before. And jiu-jitsu is great. I think it's a fantastic place to start. I mean, I am a black belt, first degree black belt, but jiu-jitsu is not the end all be all. You mentioned combatives. Combatives, to me, combatives is greater than jiu-jitsu.
Can you break that down, Kato, for those that don't habla?
Jiu-jitsu is great. Your end goal is to submit your opponent. In law enforcement, I'm not here to submit anybody. I'm here to take you into custody, put you in bracelets. If you want to call that a submission, okay, cool. But I don't know anybody who controls somebody. In jiu-jitsu, we don't control somebody and then take our hands off of them to access another tool to finally submit them. So I don't consider that a submission, but whatever your definition is, that's cool.
What would you say it's more, is it almost more important? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but having and maintaining a dominant control position. I mean, in jiu-jitsu, we do that, then we do the submission, but having a dominant control position and then applying restraints, or am I wrong there?
No, correct. The positional control is fantastic. I actually prefer a lot of wrestling pinning stuff, which to me is sorely lacking in law enforcement. You go to the police academy, they think pushing on somebody with two hands is pinning, and I'm like, no, that's not pinning. You might be pinning a hand to the ground, but that's not pinning. You need to pin the torso, primarily the hips, and if you can't do that, you're suspect, bad guy. He's off and running, and then you're off to the races. So combatives, in my opinion, just involves multiple ranges with multiple weapons, and jiu-jitsu doesn't offer that. Throwing a blue gun into the mix, don't get me wrong, it's a great place to start, but again, it's a start. The combatives is the finish.
Let's talk about, you brought up the word distance, and I had that on my list today because I think people don't understand the importance of creating and maintaining distance. And that doesn't always mean having a reaction gap. Sometimes it's closing the distance rapidly and effectively and efficiently. And I think distance management, that's, in my opinion, not completely overlooked, but really overlooked. What do you think?
Yeah. I just AI'd for Craig Douglas in Wisconsin just over a month ago, and he does an excellent drill showing how 1 foot length makes a difference in seeing your adversary. And to me, it's super important. Part for me personally, when I was on the street, I like being a little bit closer. Primarily because I was a little hard of hearing and I couldn't hear people. And a lot of people will say, well, you need 2 arms length, yada, yada. That's your reactionary gap. Okay, that's great if you're in a sterile environment in an inside, office position where you can clearly hear your partner, your suspect. But I work the street. The chances of me being in a super quiet place, like, if you're 2 arms length and you're in a domestic in the other room and you're here screaming, you can't listen to 2 things at one time. I need to be close enough to hear somebody. I also want to be close enough to grab you. And closing the distance is important. And a lot of people, especially if you don't train combatives or, even jiu-jitsu, wrestling, they're not willing to close the distance. They don't know how. And they just don't have the confidence in closing the distance. And they think, I'm not trying to poo-poo on the firearms instructors, but most firearms instructors, they tell you, hey, you need to create distance. And the only way you do that on a live fire range and safely is by moving straight backwards. Well, we see on video plenty of times how cops, they say, oh, I'm not going to fall down. Okay.
Dumped on your ass every time.
Every time. There's tons of videos you can, if you need evidence of it, and it's an easy test. I mean, you can charge at somebody with a knife and they're going to run backwards and they're going to fall on their ass. So
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I remember again going back to the 4 years or so that I worked at nightclubs. I'm hard of hearing too. Like right now, I have this persistent ringing in my ear that I've had my whole life. I probably will die with this damn ringing in my ear. But anyway, working in a
Yeah.
nightclub, I got to be real close so that you can hear me and I can hear you. So then I go to the corrections academy and I'm, in all the role playing, I'm real close. And back then I was big into jujitsu. I'm sorry, judo. Sorry, judo. And I remember the instructor staff kept going, Mr. Brown, you need to get back. And I'm thinking, what the hell do I want to get back for? I've already earned my inside position. I'm, a hook away from taking this guy down. And so I think sometimes DT instructors, you don't even understand the problem. What is the problem I'm trying to solve here?
Well, that's the other problem, the 40-hour certification.
Mm-hmm.
So many. I get it a pretty regular request. Hey, do you offer instructor certification? No. And I go, I'm in the process of starting a mentorship program. I'm gonna mentor you, and I'm gonna make sure you can teach my curriculum. And once you do that, then we'll offer an instructorship. But I just literally had a friend, and I'm not going to mention the company, very big company, who went to a 40-hour cert, and he basically he's my purple belt, and he taught multiple people because for his reps to give to the student because he didn't train at all. And so this is a guy who does not train, who was out of shape, and is now going to be a DT instructor. And I'm like, how does that work? And it won't. He'll go back to his agency. He'll say, oh, here's a curriculum, yada, yada. He'll try to set it up. He'll try to teach it. And then and it's a jiu-jitsu based program.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to ruin that program because he doesn't understand the fundamentals of jiu-jitsu, because he doesn't even train on his own. He just went to a 40-hour cert, and everybody got their cert. So, you can come work for me and, be my AI for a little while, and I get to watch you teach. And I'm not there to make you fail. I'm here, I'm here, I'm the lifeboat. If you're starting to drown, I'll come and save you. That's to me part of the job of being a mentor. So, I think the 40-hour cert, those guys just don't understand the big picture, because they're stuck in their 40-hour certification. Same thing with people who teach pressure points. That's all they teach. They think, oh, and here, I was at the academy not too long ago. Well, almost 10 years ago, but they were like, yeah, you don't want to go to the ground. Yeah, I don't want to go to the ground either, but I have skills to get back up. I have skills to hold people down. I have I can have skills to sweep people to get back on top. But if you don't have those skills, hope is not a plan. You're not just going to get up. So.
No, you might think you are. And that's one of the things my professor, Cody Hudson, they'll bring him into, I won't say the name of the department, and they do it on a Friday at the end of the DT week. And like, hey, look, we can cut class early.
Right.
All you got to do is get up, and hold them down. Like, all right, well, I guess we're going to be here all day. And they are. Nobody's ever been able to just get up and go out the door.
I've never met Cody, but I don't think he's a small person.
No, he's a good sized fella and a hell of a shooter now, man. Yeah. That guy's the real threat.
Awesome.
That dude.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm so glad that like you and Cody and Craig and Cliff Byerly and I'm forgetting a lot of folks, but Cecil are out there doing God's work, because somebody needs to do it. Because like I said before, there is a genuine fundamental misunderstanding of what we're trying to do. And even, coming at it from the firearms side, because I'm more involved I haven't taught combatives in freaking forever, but so now primarily as a firearms guy, I get it. I mean, you're too close to draw, but at the same time, looking at the ECQC curriculum, if I get an entanglement, a tie up where I can successfully draw the firearm, now I can. So I don't think that distance is or closing the distance is anything to be feared, even with a firearm, if you know what you're doing. What do you think?
Yeah, it takes training. I mean, it really does. The sad part is, I'm primarily in law enforcement, so I have plenty of firearms instructors who come to my class, and I'll ask them, hey, you know, do you teach anything? Do you teach any shooting block from the 0 to 5 foot range? And if so, roughly how many rounds is that? And it's like, yeah, we don't really do that. And I'm like, well, like statistically, it will happen. It can happen. You should train it. If you're just shooting out at 7 yards, 5 yards, okay. Hey, I'm not saying that speed and accuracy is not important. It's 100% important.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a whole nother range there that you're missing out,
Right.
And they see it. They see the deficiency, but one, they probably just don't want to add to their curriculum because of time. But to me, that's shame on them.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have it. I'm not trying to minimize shooting at distance, but if you can shoot well at 25 yards, you're going to shoot well at 5 yards.
Amen. That's
you know?
right. Yeah.
So like if you reverse engineer it and you start doing a little more distance shooting, they're going to shoot well inside 10 yards.
Right.
But people just don't want to spend the time doing it. They don't want to look at it. They don't want to entertain it because that turns into another rabbit hole. I mean, here in my classes, I'll see a lot of guys who will take the muzzle and they'll jam the muzzle in their partner. And I'll be like, okay, so you just did a contact shot. I go, do you know how to perform a one-handed malfunction in case that gun
Because you're about to learn.
Right. And
if you don't know, here we go.
They're always like, and then they're like staring off into space thinking, oh, how do I do that? And I go, so I gave a SIRT pistol to a guy and I said, hey, show me how you do a one-handed malfunction. And he hits the mag release, mag falls out. And now I go, now you just created another problem. Can you do a one-handed reload? And he couldn't. And I'm like, I go, this thing's just rapidly spiraling downward and you're screwing yourself here. I go, stop contact shotting people when you don't need to. I'm not saying contact shots are horrible. You just need to train them, and you need to train all the possibilities of now having a malfunction, clearing that malfunction. God forbid you eject that mag. Now you got to do a reload. I mean, you're just causing more problems for yourself. So a little bit of training goes a long way, and but it falls on deaf ears.
Yeah. Well, and I think part of it is, and I think this is changing. I see good things with what you guys are out there doing, because you and I, when we grew up, it was a silo, right? There was a shooting group here, and they didn't call it combatives back then. It was DT group over here, or whatever, martial artists guys over here, edge weapon dudes over there, and they just did not communicate. They didn't train together. There was no weapons-based integration at all. And I told Cecil, Seekland and I tried this back in the early 90s. Like, how do we integrate these things? And ultimately, after about a year of playing with it in the mat rooms, like, I don't know, I can't solve this problem. It was beyond us at the time. We didn't know enough jiu-jitsu. There wasn't jiu-jitsu schools on every damn street corner like there's today. We had a little bit of judo in the Marine Corps and cop stuff. And it's like, so thank God for people that have kind of solved that problem as good as we are now in the 21st century. And I look forward to where it's going, but the integration is slowly getting there. But like you said, having those conversations with the firearms community and just say, hey man, what are you doing in that space? Can we at least agree that those spaces are going to happen? Well, yeah, they're going to happen. Then what do you do with it? I don't know. They'll go to the ground. Well, that's not an answer.
It's not an answer. The answer is just training. I've been pushing the Combative Summit. Combatives Association is a Facebook page started by John Valentine, and last year the last summit was awesome. And I was pushing last year's, and I'm pushing this year's even harder. Pretty much every day I put a little something out just for the Combatives Association and the Combative Summit. And that integration is really what the Combatives Association is all about. And the people inside the Combatives Association, I mean, you got OG Kelly McCann, you got Matt Larson, you got Craig Douglas, Cecil, Jerry Wetzel. I mean, the list goes on and
Is
on.
Guy in there?
Yeah, Guy Schnitzler's in there.
Yep.
He was in attendance last year. I mean, he did an excellent block on Saps and Jacks. Unfortunately, they're illegal here in Illinois, but man, what an excellent tool. But yeah, the combatives in and of itself every cop needs to start looking at combatives. Yes, go start training jiu-jitsu, work your way through some little jiu-jitsu, and then start integrating weapons. And that's really what combatives is all about. And then come to the Combatives Association Summit down in Biloxi, Mississippi, end of September. You need more information, combativesummit.com. So,
yeah, I appreciate you putting that out there, man. I need to get Guy on the show. I went to a shooting course with him recently. And, you've said multiple times here this morning, Kato, like, get the training. And what I keep telling to people is it's the same group. When I go to training as a student or teaching with Mike or something, I just crack up because it's the same guys and gals every single time. I mean, there might be a couple new faces. I get it right. But predominantly it's like, oh yeah, it's like a family reunion. So I don't know what we need to do. And thank God for training junkies. Don't get me wrong. I love them. They're our family, right? But we need to bring more people into our community. How do we do that?
Yeah, you know what? If I had the answer to that, I probably wouldn't be sitting here right now, or I would be, but I'd be doing this from Bali.
Yeah, from the inside of Lambo.
Right. I really wish I had the answer to that. Really, we just need to keep encouraging people, to get on the mats. Like the people that we encourage into the firearms realm, we need to encourage the same way into the mat room, which is way harder.
Oh, yeah.
And we need to get them to then integrate weapons. And once they start to see the light and to see how important the integration is, but I really think it's going to be a long haul. I mean, it's the overhaul for police reforms. We're slowly headed in the right direction.
Okay, what needs to be reformed? You mentioned police reform, and you think we're heading in the right direction, Kato. What are you talking about? What needs to be reformed?
Just updating training. I think. Don't get me wrong. I think John says it really well. John Valentine. He says he's like, in order to have successful verbal judo, you have to be good at judo. You have to have the confidence and the skills to back it up. But you see too many of these officers who are unfortunately out of shape, tool dependent, and then they can't even handle even a minor altercation without going to a tool. And then when that tool fails, I just saw a video, and I have a video of my PowerPoint where a guy uses a taser, ineffective. Taser gets ripped away. Guy goes to a baton. The baton gets stolen, and I believe he tries to introduce a pistol, and then he fights over that, gets shot with his own pistol, and then that pistol gets taken away. And there was just another video, I didn't catch where a guy used again a taser. That didn't work. He was using a baton. That wasn't working. And don't get me wrong, tools are great. When I used to work on cars regularly, you needed tools. These only work so much.
Mhm.
But if you don't know how and when to switch, the tool's not going to do you any good, especially when it's ineffective.
Let's unpack a couple of things you said there. There's a little all start of Kazushi, just off balancing for those that don't obla on that one. But I mean, because it goes back to you were talking about in order to use verbal judo, you got to know judo, right? So, I can verbally manipulate you and off balance you if I know what I'm doing, but just the same as a drag and a foot sweep, but you have to know where you're going and what the hell you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And to your point about the tools, man, the more they take away from combatives, and yes, I'm talking to you, NYPD, the more you take away the ability to use certain control positions, the more you're going to have officers going to the tool belt, and nobody wins in that escalation. Nobody. In backing up just a little bit, is relative to the tool belt. If I could wave a magic wand, and we may have talked about this last time I had you on Kato, but everybody would start in corrections because you don't have any tool belt. Your tool belt is maybe a can of pepper spray, some latex gloves, and a freaking radio and handcuffs. I mean, that's it. So what you have to do is use this and this. If you listen to the podcast, what I'm saying is use your mouth and use what's between your ears to solve the problem of 48 inmates in front of you. And oh, by the way, now you go out into the street and you know the kind of person you're dealing with and interacting with, and how much they and what the currency of respect is on the street, how your body language in relation to those around you is perceived. You don't have the tools. The radio is not going to get you instant gratification. You learn so many things. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I've never heard anybody else talk about this, but it's kind of common sense. The tools on your tool belt are primarily distance tools. There's only one tool that's on your belt that's designed to be used within body contact, and that's your handcuffs.
Mm-hmm.
But when they're being trained or being taught, and they're taught, hey, these are distance tools. You need X amount of feet for this amount of pro spread, yada yada yada. But then there's never any pressure testing, and
Right.
if you don't pressure test it, what's your gauge of the proper distance? That distance gets closed fast, and before you know it, what was 20 feet is now 10 feet, which is now 10 feet, which is now 5 feet. And not to pick on taser, but if you don't get the probe spread, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
Nothing. Right.
Yeah.
And I can't speak for taser, and again, I don't want to go off on a taser tangent, but taser developed a new taser 10, I believe. You can discharge 2 probes. You can every trigger press is a probe, so you can actually change the distance or create more, we'll say, distance, or creating a greater probe spread just by changing locations. And then you will get an NMI. But again, you're talking, we're here in Chicago. 6 months out of the year, we're wearing clothing.
Right.
Some of it very heavy. Timing of it. There's so many other aspects that, and we would probably have a better success rate if we just trained with it a little more realistically. But you got time constraints. Everybody's always worried about injury. Yeah,
I don't want to pick on taser because I've never been certified in one. I didn't have one. Our department, though it worked, the on shift supervisor had one, and you didn't. So it was never anything I had any access to or familiarization with. However, I think there is having said all that, my unprofessional opinion is we need to have a broader conversation about taser's efficacy and its limitations, because it is a distance weapon, and more often than not, what we see is you have a failure to get NMI, and your distance is now closed, and you're dry stunning this guy for what? And there's no communication to tell him to what you want him to do. So, and Cecil wrote an article for the site, Cecil Birch. You can find it on AmericanWarStudy.com, and it was, I think it was called Infighting Weapons Access Triage. Forgive me, I can't remember what the name of it was, but it prompted me to write one. And the number one thing, I'm like, we don't do enough communications when we're in combatives. Like, what do you want him to do? Are you just kicking this guy's ass, or are you trying to get his hand loose? So I think that's a missing component. Tell him what you want him to do. If you're just dry stunning the shit out of somebody's thighs without telling them you want them to move their hands from their waistband to behind their back, they think you're just being cruel. I don't know, man.
Yeah. Communication is super important. And I think part of, okay, so I was rolling with another black belt, and we were talking about some street stuff just prior, and we're rolling, and it just dawned on me. I asked him, I said, "Hey, bro, since you started jiu-jitsu, when you are now rolling with bad guys on the ground, like, do you notice that you're not MFing them
Exactly
as much?" And he kind of was like, "Actually, yeah, now that you mention it." And I go, "Well, we don't really communicate while we're rolling in jiu-jitsu. Like, yeah, give me this submission. You know what I mean? Like, yes, just tap, because otherwise you're gonna fall asleep. But we don't do that. But where I'm going with this is jiu-jitsu gives you the confidence, and it slows everything down, so that now when you're on the street, you can communicate and say small little terms like, "Hey, stop resisting. Put your hands behind your back, or put your hands out where I can see them." And then you can go from there. But all too often, because people don't train in body contact enough, that it's just, they just get in the loop of stop resisting, stop resisting, stop resisting, stop resisting. Get on the ground. They're already in the ground. Get on the ground. They're already on the ground. Roll over, roll over, roll over. They're already rolled over. You know what I mean? Like, and it comes from lack of training, and you need to do hard physical things in order to see that. Oh yeah, hey, rolling somebody over can be easy if you have some skill. I had a kid in one of my classes. He was 23, and at the time I was 53. And I said, "Hey, look, you're 23 years old. You're 30 years younger than me." I go, "You have now 30 years, to the end of your career to develop skills." And I go, the only way I can keep up with a 23-year-old is because I have skill. I've lost a lot of mobility, especially now since I had surgery. I've lost some flexibility. I lost my agility. I lost my speed. I go, yeah, I gained strength in the last 30 years. But the strength and skill are the only things that you're gonna keep if you progress over 30 years. You're gonna lose everything else. So why not in 30 years build skill? And he was like, "Oh, I never thought of it that way." And I go, "Hey, look, man, that's because you're 23 and you're not thinking big picture." And it's just, you have the time. You have a 30-year career, or however long you plan on working. Start building the skill. Start day one. So, but and building the skill of the gift of gab, communication, use of tasers, hand to hand, firearms. It's all important. You have to be multidisciplinary, and you have to figure out how and when all that meshes together.
Yeah, again, and I hate to keep being in the drip, but it takes training. It takes putting yourself in those uncomfortable positions, because there's people talk about ego death from doing psychedelics and DMT. Man, the mat room would cause ego death, brother. I'm telling you right now. But you don't gain that confidence you were talking about, Kato, unless you have, it comes from a deep well of competence and knowing what you can do. And so that I mean, I'm not saying there's not a time to MF somebody. I'm a firm believer that there is a time that in order to communicate with this person, he doesn't speak the same language that normal people that you and I run with in our community. So I may have to use that, but in certain circumstances, like, I don't want him to feel disrespected. There's people around watching, they're videotaping. Hey brother, I know this hurts, man. Just go ahead and give me your, go ahead. And so there's a time to slow it down. And that's another thing I think about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It's a time dilation device. If you know what the hell you're doing, it slows things down. And anytime I watch a polyester pylon, it's like, I know you're not trained, because it's just movement, random movement for movement's sake. I'm like, what are you doing? Now we see it on the range too, in the flat range, and we see it in combatives. We see it everywhere, and it's just one thing. And you've said it multiple times: lack of training. And I don't understand the profession of arms, whether it's military or law enforcement. I've been on both sides of that equation. This is your profession, man. So it's part of being a professional to do what the average will not do on a regular, consistent, repeatable basis. And okay, I get it. You got a golf habit, or you like to bass fish, but my God, man, this is your life we're talking about.
They actually just don't take the profession serious.
Yeah.
That's all I can say. I don't really have a true explanation. I've heard all the excuses. I don't have time. Yeah, that's bullshit.
Right.
I don't have the money. Dude, I offer more free training here in the Chicagoland area than anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
If you have the time, I will comp a spot, and I teach free training all the time. And how many people show up? Very little. Right. And I keep telling all the people who come to any of my classes who come for free, I go, look, spread the word, bring a friend. You know what I mean? Like, I offer free training every Tuesday at the gym. That's slowly starting to grow. But even then, it's hit or miss. So they just need to get on the mats. They need to get in the range. They need to get to the weight room. They need to stop eating shitty food. The gas station roller dogs. It's a lifestyle. If you want to be in this line of work, you need to take it serious. You got to get off of Netflix and start focusing. Here, okay, get off Netflix and listen to a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Put in an Audible book. Yes, Audible costs whatever, $20 a month or whatever it is. That's an investment. $20 is nothing. And if you can't get through a book on duty in this day and age, you're literally just lying to me. I know that because that's how I funded my education, is towards the end of my career was all podcasts, books, Audible. It's just pure laziness.
I agree. And speaking of podcasts, if you've enjoyed listening to Kato and I this morning, go back and listen to round 1 we did with Kato. I think it was show number 285 about 3 years ago. A lot of this stuff, man, people think it's new. It's really not. This stuff has been around forever. My good friend Todd Fox with Tor Protection. Todd?
I do.
Yeah,
Todd hooked me up for working a little gig. So yeah, Todd's a great dude.
Yeah, he is, man. And he's a collector of like these old cop jiu-jitsu books from like the late 1800s, man.
Yeah, that's awesome.
People think this shit is like, oh, this is new, cutting edge. No, it's not, man. Just stop fooling yourself. Just get out there and start training. And if your department won't pay for it, I guess what, man? You got to do like I used to do and probably used to do as well, man. You got to pay for it out of your own pocket. Because what's your life worth at the end of the day, man? What's your life worth?
Yeah, and think of you fail to train, and I bring up this story real quick. it made national news. There was a cop who got shot, and he got on the air, and his last words was like, "Tell my wife and kids I love them." And I'm not trying to make fun of that guy. It's a very serious thing. It hurt my heart to hear that. Made me emotional, but I tell guys, I go, one, your wife and kids know you love them. Don't leave that on the air for them to hear in the future, and then to have them listen to that over and over and over again. And what I tell people, and the reason I say that is like, okay, let's say you're not training jiu-jitsu, but you have whatever hobby it is, golf, right? I go to the golf range and then start thinking about all the bills you owe, your mom who's sick, your health, maybe your kid's sick, yada, yada. Start thinking of all those negative things in your life, and then try golfing. See how your performance is. I guarantee you it's going to be in the crapper. So, you need to do stuff. You need to train so that you can be focused on what's right in front of you, versus all these other things that are in the background. You're shot in the leg and you're screaming, "I need help," yada, yada, yada. Hey, you know what? How about you rip out your tourniquet and apply that to yourself calmly, collectively, and then get on the air and say, "Hey, man, I've been shot. I just applied a tourniquet, and this is where I'm at." But that takes training.
Yeah. Speaking of training, Kato, if somebody wanted to train with you, brother, where do they need to go?
Rectitudetraining.com. I'm all over social media. Just type in Rectitude Training. It's me. I'm also on Instagram under my, I have a jiu-jitsu page. It's primarily law enforcement specific. It's Murakami, Murakami. I noticed I added an extra I there. It's Murakami_JJ. That's me. There's a lot of law enforcement stuff, Combatives Association stuff in there. But yeah, if you're in the Chicagoland area and you want to train, hit me up. Or you're outside Chicago, you're coming to Chicago, let me know. I just mentioned I AI'd for Craig, and Craig's been pushing me to try and go into open enrollment, and so I just recently rewrote a curriculum for that. I want to beta test that a little bit before I take that on the road. So maybe beta testing that later this year.
Oh, sweet.
And then taking that on the road. I've already had a couple people reach out and say, "Hey, what would it take you to come out here?" Yada, yada. And I'm like, not much, just a few students. And, I'm more than willing to travel. So I don't want to make it a road show like Craig's road show, but I'm more than willing to travel on occasion.
Well, I really appreciate you coming back on today, brother. It's always good to chat with you.
You sure was, Rich. You take care of yourself.
Yes, sir. Guys and gals out there in Warrior Nation, don't forget the fight is coming. You ready?